Welcome back to Owl 003. Today I have a guest, a friend of mine, Don DeCourcelle, and he is another remote viewer. Came along about the same time as I have. Very standout remote viewer, highly proficient. But what's interesting about Don also is he is just one of these guys that just keeps on learning. I mean, he's had training with TDS. HRVG. You had some training with Angela CRV too, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So his perspective is really unique because this discussion really is going to primarily be around the ideogram, and I think Don and I share this interest in that. It's really interesting to see the ideogram tool used differently throughout different modalities and see it functions just as well or better. Um, so with that, Don, like thanks for coming. I'm glad. Thanks for joining me here. I appreciate it.
Sure. So, hello, everybody. And I guess I'd like to start off by asking you a question, David, and that is, when you learned, you took training in CRV, right?
Yeah.
So now that you've been doing remote viewing for a while, and I recognize you as a very proficient remote
Oh,
viewer,
thanks, buddy.
um, I have to ask, are you doing everything by the book, or have you sort of
Mm.
adapted it to your own?
I have adapted. I have played around. I've adapted what I call them retrofits for certain things. Like if I'm gonna do something like a horse race or something like that. I have a very shortened methodology I like using because there's so little there. I'm just looking for a little spark of something in something. I'm not trying to dive deep into that. Um, so I do little retrofits. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, because I guess what I have come to the conclusion is that anybody who is really um, proficient in remote viewing has their own little customizations going, and I'm in that camp myself. And I guess what you're asking me about and what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit of that. It's a little bit of my customization of, the standard remote viewing methodology, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, Now, David, is it actually possible to share my screen with this sort of,
I think so. Give it a shot.
let me see. Um, there's a plus sign activities, play together, raise hand, watch together. Let's see more. Enter full screen, device settings. What's this? Share your screen. Okay. All right. So now I want to share my entire screen, and that would be this one. And now, is there an OK button? Or, yeah, there it is. Okay. Are you seeing my
Yep. I see
my
your
New
desktop.
York screen? Okay. All right. So now, are you seeing this big white window?
Yeah.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we're seeing here is this is my online folder of my remote viewing sessions. Okay. I started off by in the TDS format. Basically, TDS, what you do is um, you draw a full page scribble as your first page, which they call the transit line, and then you proceed on with your sessions, and it goes something like that. All right. So so I was doing this, and I was collecting these sessions, and because I was really sort of fascinated with this remote viewing thing, what I did was I started making these Microsoft Word documents that I was just going over my session, and I was trying to understand, what I had here. I mean, what words were sort of like on target, which words were not so on target or way off target or whatever. I just wanted to understand whether I was even in the ballpark, right? So I started putting these documents together, And, I had the one next to the other. And, later on it occurred to me, I can't really figure out what I'm looking at here. So maybe I should put a picture of the target, the target reveal photo or whatever into my Microsoft Word session so that I can, sort of look at it and understand what this session was about. And that's when I noticed um, this. This was the ideogram or transit line sketch for this particular target. Now, do you see any similarities
Oh yeah.
there?
Yeah.
So I realized that even before I started my session, I'm just letting my hand scribble this thing out in like a second or whatever. There was data coming through here, and I didn't even realize it until this was like, David, this was months later that I had this recognition, okay, realization. And so I started like looking over my other ones. All right, for example, this one on the atomic cannon. Um, let's see if I bring this over. Okay. I had this thing going on. It looks like something and something going up and up and up, all right? Not exactly a perfect representation and certainly not artistic, but there's communication going on here.
Yeah.
All right. And David, this was around the same time that on YouTube, where on the Facebook groups, that let me see, am I back?
Yeah, you're
live? I
back.
think
You're back.
okay. This was about the same time that there was a big discussion on the various remote viewing groups where they were saying there's like no visual content in an ideogram.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. Well, what
And
I've
I'm looking
yeah.
at my data, and I'm going, you know what? Life must be really different for different people. It's like, in fact, I'm not even sure that what I'm experiencing other people experience. So
Yeah.
let them have their belief, okay? And I have mine, but I'm just going to keep quiet on this because I don't know, maybe I'm right. Maybe this thing is like really, very, very.
Well, I've seen you pull out what I find really fascinating about the way you which this stage one, this is a TDS process, right? I mean, this is their
Yeah.
stage one, basically, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so what I really find fascinating is because you've had CRV training and the ideogram, the way I was trained, which I'm sure was very similar to yours through Angela, if not identical. I mean, you're just tapping the signal in that stage one. You're moving on to stage two. As perspectively for me, watching you go, you're pulling out these big data, these big concepts, these big ideas, through these data bubbles, these that you it. So
Oh,
for
you've
me,
seen that.
yeah,
You've seen
absolutely. Yeah,
that.
I watched your video and stuff. So perspectively, I guess what I'm saying is from the perspective of a controlled remote viewer, as this model is built on this crescendo of information from stage one to stage two to stage and so on.
Right, right.
But for what I find fascinating though is you are pulling out these big clumps of data, high level data, out of what I can only, from my perspective, is like an expanded stage one, like a built out stage one.
Yeah, yeah. So let me say some words about that, okay? I was taking this class with John Vivanco, okay? He, I saw some YouTube videos of his when I was sort of like thinking about getting involved in taking a class. And what attracted me was he was a meditator. He lived in a Zen meditation center for I think a year or something like that. And he had this like meditation background. And I had been doing meditation as well, um, with this side hobby of keeping track of the information that was flowing through my mind as I was sitting there with my eyes closed in a darkened room. And I think it was like that awareness, that becoming aware, focusing on just what's moving on, what's in your mind, how you're dealing with it, and so on. That I had to take this class with Vivanco. Okay, he was just the right guy for me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I took this class, and I didn't realize it at the time, but he had this sort of like open minded approach to remote viewing where he with it. He wanted you to like make it your own, figure out how to make it work for you. And uh, I I took that and I ran with it. I was like, I was doing exactly what he said in the beginning. But then, and this is coming closer to what you were specifically asking me about the ideograms. At first, I probed the ideogram like everybody does. I'd take a pen and I'd poke at it, and hopefully some kind of message would come back. And one day, I was doing a session, and I wasn't getting anywhere, and I kept sort of like moving my pen back and forth across that ideogram. And finally, I just started like retracing the ideogram in the air. Okay. And then a word popped in my mind at the beginning. So I wrote that down, and then I continued from that point, and then I got another word. And when I put the two words together, they were a phrase. They actually flowed one into another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. So, let's just keep doing that. And what I found was by tracing over my ideogram, it was more like, for me, replaying a record groove. You're putting the needle in at the beginning, and you're sort of like sliding along that groove, and then something will pop into your head. Now, that was a realization. I didn't realize that at first, but then I realized that this was kind of working. So sometimes I would like actually write a little line where I got a perceptive word on my ideogram. I'm like, now if you think of an ideogram as this thing, I was like drawing a line over here and writing over here, researched, because right at that point on the ideogram, I got the word researched. And then I continued along the line a little bit more, and I got for a long time. I mean, these words I just hear in my mind. And I wrote down in my session researched for a long time. And that turned out to be like an accurate perception for this particular target. Okay. So I think the next big realization for me was I had to set aside a session. I was going to take a break for lunch or something like that. And so then I came back, some hours or whatever later. And I was like, where did I leave off again? And I was like going over the ideogram. And I got the very same word at the very same place I did before.
That's interesting.
And I was like, wow, this is blowing my mind. This is really blowing my mind. It's like
it's almost like a braille bump, like it was,
and I'm just
yeah. Like
so,
it was in that ideogram.
All right, so it was in that ideogram. It was like embedded in it, like energy is embedded in it or something. And so this almost like turned over my whole approach to remote viewing. Before, it was something that I had to work at.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was finding it was more like something I had to just receive and document. Okay. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever I get out of the groove is like what I'm going to write down and document. And I don't have to do any work.
Mm-hmm.
I just let it tell me what the story is. Okay.
Right.
So, isn't this really different? This is so different. Okay. This is why I'm actually glad that you're discussing this, because I think a lot of remote viewers have their own little thing going, and it's interesting to see how it helps them.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
like,
if this,
it's so vastly different from. I mean, when I think back of my, or even when I have, if I teach it, it's a very technical process. I mean, like when you're going through the different types of
yeah,
multiples, and it's very, um, as to where it's almost like there's almost a thing where I mean you have like direction changes of a pen. You got to break up the ideograms and stuff, as to where you almost have like this free form expression, this one big free form expression. You could keep replaying it
yeah,
over like a record, and then to go off, take breaks, come back, and pick it right back up. Trace that same ideogram you had made an hour ago or whatnot, right? And still pick up on
yeah, yeah.
that data. Interesting. Now,
That data, that energy in it, or
yeah.
whatever it is, I don't know how
Now,
you
how
even
do you
describe
shake
it.
off now when you're? Because I've seen you. Like I said, I watched the video where you did this. Now, you're pulling off these big concepts, and you've got AOLs. Like I said, it's hard to describe because you're picking up a lot of
It is
high
hard to
level
describe.
data. You're picking up a lot of high level data in this kind of from my perspective, a stage one framework. So it's like it's really impressive. So, and not only that, but you've
Yeah,
got AOL, 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 and you've got these high level
yeah.
concepts, and then you do these thought bubbles, and it's almost like you shake it out, like you're shaking the gold out another layer with these thought bubbles at the end. How are you determining the noise
Well,
from the
that's
from the?
very interesting that you say that. That's
Yeah.
okay. All right. Let me take a stab at this. All right. This is going to be a little bit of a different direction than maybe what you're expecting, but every remote viewer brings something to the table, which is their own experience, their own knowledge
Mm-hmm.
base, and what have you. And I'm sort of a technical person and a puzzle solver. I played this Asian board game called Go. I was real big into it in my 20s and early 30s. And, um, it's sort of like when I don't know if you play chess or anything like that, but like if you get into it,
Mm-hmm.
if you really get into it, there are openings you have to know. And then there's like a language that you need to communicate with, people who know the game. So, you can cut through the haze and really get to the issues. Well, I was finding with this remote viewing that my subconscious had its own kind of language, and it was not regular English.
Mm-hmm.
It had, I don't know, different. It had a different point of view, and it used words I sometimes didn't know, and quite often, actually, usually, I'll hear a couple of different words in my mind that I write down. I realize I don't even know precisely what that means, and I'll stop, go to my phone, and Google the definition and write the definition into my session and then continue. All
Words
right.
outside of your normal
So,
vocabulary, far
um,
outside your normal vocabulary.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now getting back to what I bring to the table as a, technical person and a game player, my subconscious seems to like to play games with me. Okay. I mean, this is actually the way it seems to want me to work with it. Okay. So what it's giving me is a puzzle. It's a puzzle to be
Mm-hmm.
solved.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll give me these perceptions and like, I have no idea what they're all about, but because I'm a technical person, let me arrange them. Let me create a thought bubble of this and a thought bubble of that, and here's another one, and here's another one, and they all seem to be dancing around this one. Let me move that to the middle and then hook these other things up on the sides. Okay, so it seems like this thing in the middle is like, it's kind of like the focus of what all these other things are about. And then I'll continue my session. Not that this really influences anything other than it's sort of like trying to understand the language that it's communicating with me. Okay, I'm trying to understand really how my subconscious thinks.
This is what I think separates, I mean, not definitively, but one of the qualifiers that separates a moderate level remote viewer to a very high level remote viewer, and that is you're there for the process. You're there to open it up.
Yeah.
You enjoy that process of taking the pieces out, putting them together, putting the, because you know this, a lot of remote viewers, you'd be lucky if you get 10 pages out of them. They want to get it in, get it done, and look at the feedback. And when you do that, you can't really sink into it unless you want to open it up. You have this mystery factor. You have this love of the game type of feeling, the love of unboxing the target, because that's what kind of draws you in.
Actually, David.
Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, actually, David, you gave me that idea. Okay, you were talking to us on one of the Facebook remote viewing channels or groups or whatever. You were talking about people not giving themselves enough time to enjoy their session. And I thought, that is so right on. That is, you really do need to sink into it and enjoy it. This is not like something you're going to worry about or whatever. Enjoy it, okay? Whatever data you get, enjoy it. And when you start enjoying it, you want to go deeper.
Oh, yeah.
And when you go deeper, then you start getting some really amazing stuff.
Yeah, there's a point in the session to me. I mean, because sometimes you get targets that are just, there's not much there, But when you have a target, there's a lot of meat there. There's a lot of meat on that bone. You kind of be drilling away into that target, and there gets to a point, and what it feels like to me, I don't know how it feels like to you, but it almost feels like, it's almost like the target just kind of like relents, just, okay, just gives up everything, it's just kind of like, but you can't reach that pinnacle point unless you stick in there. If you bounce in, that's why I'll take some breaks, I'll go in and out, but I want to feel like I've burrowed out that target in its entirety as best as I can. And a lot of times what'll happen, I'm sure this happens to you too, is when you're if you're working with viewers that are kind of they just don't put out that kind of an effort or whatever, I don't know how you want to describe it, then no matter how many tools they bring to the table, you're going to bury them in data, because you're going to bury, your data is just going to bury their session because you hung in there. You hung in the session. You're teasing it out.
There is definitely something to hanging in there. That is a very, very important thing. And quite honestly, I think there's kind of like levels or steps a remote viewer goes through. At first, you want to just find out whether it works. And then after you prove to yourself that it works, then you're sort of like, curious about, what it's going to say and what have you. But it isn't until you really sort of learn to enjoy that step, which is your comment exactly. You need to enjoy the session, that you really start like getting it. Okay, what's going on? What questions do I need to ask here? How do I classify or catalog or assemble this data? It's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
What I've noticed too, Don, is and this is my opinion in my own work, but I also see it in your work too, is first of all, you're your toughest critic in this, and I don't care who you are. If you hit, if you hit, great, but if you don't, I mean, like, I'm terrible on my side. I mean, I am just so bad. If it doesn't go good, I don't even, like, I just have this internal monologue. Like, I'm not even talking to my subconscious for a week because I'm so pissed that I missed this target. But just because I'm just a bitter old man like that. But what I'm saying is, though, is over time, it evolves, and it's like you just keep raising your own personal best. I mean, you kind of keep raising the stakes, like if you go back to when you first started and you were, oh, look at this session I did 5 years ago, oh, look how impressive that. You look back now, you're like, oh, that was that's garbage. But now you do this stuff, and it's like every session you do, because you have this, you want to keep improving, you have this drive to get better, you keep sharpening the blade. It's like you just keep getting better.
I don't know whether it's me sharpening it or my subconscious is sharpening me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Who knows?
I sometimes feel like this is a cooperative thing. It's like, I'm teaching it how to work with me, and it's teaching me how to work with it, and that is really an interesting game right there.
And those words that you say, when you talk about the words that, because you get, and you remote view, you know this definitely, but you get these words that are completely outside of your vocabulary. And 99% of the time, that data is gold in your session.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so, right. and it's gold because you've been doing it so long, you go, that ain't from me. Wherever that came from was. But what's interesting is your subconscious is so ingenious. There may be 10 different ways to describe one thing, but your subconscious wants you so badly to succeed. It'll give you a word that's completely out of your vocabulary to make sure that you put it down. You could describe a box, a coffin or whatever, but you get some word that's completely out of your vocabulary to describe that same word. You would describe it completely differently, and it's gold, and your subconscious gave it to you that way. It's just fascinating.
Well, that's part of the, for me, David, that's all part of the gamesmanship that it's playing with me. Okay, It's not going to just tell me that there's something there. It has to use an obscure word that I have to look up.
Yeah.
So it knows it hasn't given anything away. It's still playing remote viewing. It's still keeping me blind, but it's giving me clues that when I look up, put me back even better on target than I was before. Pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, and it does. And it's like that. It's almost like your subconscious wants to play ball with you, and he wants to pass the ball back and forth. He's not just going to give you the whole. He's not just going to give you the whole cornucopia. Just hand it over. No. I want you to tease it out of me. You're gonna have to go back and forth.
It is, honest to God. There was this reminds me of a remote viewing target that I did for Rick Hilliard. Okay, he was. We were in a team together at one point, and he was saying, okay, anybody who wants to do a fun target, let me know. He didn't say anything more about it. So I said, all right, I'm interested. So he gave me a number. I did a session. And then he said, okay, target reveal. What I asked you was, who's going to win the World Series next year? And this is before the season started. So I looked through my session, and it was like, this looked like a serious miss here. We all have these. And he said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just look for some data in there that might be indicating like a city or, a location. Your teams are all state-based. So, So I went through my session, and there were two curious pieces of data, both labeled AOLs in my session. One was Habersham, and the one below that was Litany. They didn't seem to have anything to do with anything that I was talking about. My session seemed to be vaguely talking about some powerful ground action, fast movements and what have you. But anyway, Habersham and Litany. So he's saying, look through your session and see if there's anything that, well, Habersham sounded a little bit like a town. So I went on to Google and I typed it in. And I didn't have it spelled right, but it talked about a minor league or practice baseball in Georgia. So I thought, okay, um, well, is there a major league team in Georgia? And I typed that into Google and it came back with Atlanta Braves.
That's interesting. That's what I got. Well, actually, but they didn't win that year.
All,
That's what.
all right, all right.
Yeah.
So let me
Go ahead.
let me finish this. Okay. So Atlanta Braves. So okay. So now I type in Atlanta Braves chance of winning into Google or something like that. And at the time, now remember this is before the season started. It listed them as potentially in fourth place from their view at that time.
Hmm.
You know how they viewed the team. So
Is this past World Series that you
no,
just?
this was a couple of years ago.
So is this
All
where they
right.
won when the
This
Braves?
is where they won.
Oh, okay, fantastic. All right,
All right.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, um, you know, I mentioned to Rick that you know through this obscure set of sort of decoding. Yeah, my subconscious loves this decoding stuff. Um, it it sort of indicated Atlanta Braves, which here's the information I got from Google. It looks like they're going to come in fourth, or at least they're considered to be in fourth standing at the moment. But there's one curious thing here. The word that I got after Habersham or however it was spelled was litany. And I looked that up. And the definition of litany was a series.
Wow.
A series. So unbeknownst to me, he instantly put $50 down on that team. They won. He won money.
That's
I,
fantastic. That's great.
yeah, it's but this is the gamesmanship that's going on
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, in my subconscious or whatever, and I enjoy
And you
this.
didn't, right?
Okay,
You didn't put any money
I
down, did you?
I didn't think anything of it. I
Yeah.
thought like this is like yet another throwaway session. So
Now, do you do a lot of stuff like that, like games and ARV stuff like that, or no?
I have not gotten into ARV at all.
Yeah.
I've been um,
Well, Hellfire keeps
quite
you
on.
busy, right? I mean,
Hellfire, it does keep me busy, and I have to say that they have stepped up my game considerably because um, when you're in a situation where you're getting a target, you do a session on it, and what they are in the habit of doing is doing a retasking. Okay, where they will say, okay, I'm going to give you a different number now, and I'm going to this is a retask. And sometimes there might be a little bit of front loading where they might say, you mentioned the word baseball, uh, you know, give me more information on that. Okay, so in the process of doing that, I don't really pay any attention to any of that. I just do another session. I'll use I'll put a B after the target ID, some, 5555, B, and send that in. But I find that it seems like you're drilling into it again, David.
mm-hmm.
You're going into that thing again, and because you are, it's getting like more information, and I don't
It's
know, maybe
breaking
there's
apart
some.
faster. It's opening up
It
faster.
it is,
The
it is,
data's
and
getting
so
higher, clearer. Yeah.
so now I'm getting exposed to this new idea of it's coming in in more and better kind of a thing, and so yeah, I'm loving it. Yes, this
Yeah.
is really
Well,
it's
I
wonderful.
noticed, Don, like if because like I said, if there's a big target, I need to go through it a few times to really break it out, and make sense
Well, I'm
out of it.
glad you do because I think that you're going through the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
You're
and what I think is interesting is it's just like that though. You go through it, and what I notice is, my point is, like, I'll forget about it. I'll come back to it. Then when I go to write up a summary on all the targets, I'll see, okay, look, I forgot all about the target, came back to it, and this came up again. This same sketch came up again. So,
Okay.
so this must be, I'm picking up on something. This has got to be probably accurate.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I just recently did a session where, honestly, it seemed to be, like I had mentioned, when you do the ideogram, it seemed to be telling a story. But this particular session, it seemed like it was being told by several different points of view. They were all coming together. But the thing is, I wasn't used to that. And so this is a little different. And when I wrote my session summary, I just laid it out exactly like that. It seems to be coming from different points of view. Here's what I got here. Here's what I got here. And, the session summary, I think, is more important than I thought originally. I thought it was sort of like an optional thing and whatever. But really, when you have the confidence to do a session summary, you also have the ability to not worry about the data like
Exactly.
you did when you
Exactly. You can put anything anywhere on the sheet. Just judge me on what's in that last piece of paper that I said. Like, out of all this stuff, this is what I feel good about. This is what I want to bring home.
Yeah. That is a really important thing. Maybe that's yet another step. It's like a confidence step or something like that. It's like you can report it and you're not going to kill yourself over it. This is like, this is what I got, and there it is.
And depending on the tasking too, like, again, it's just so people understand that listening, imagine like you're watching a movie in your head. Well, then somebody just threw that movie into a wood chipper, and now all that information is coming at you. So you're not getting that full flavor movie. You're getting pieces. Everything's coming at you in pieces.
Yeah, right.
Some pieces are bigger than others. So so sometimes in a summary, because sometimes it's tasked as an event, it's tasked as a structure, it's tasked as, so you're trying to find the right words. You don't really want to be wrong, and sometimes I'll just be like, oh, look, it consists of this, that, and the other. Because it may unfold as an event, or it may kind of feel different. So the summary to me is like another evolution thing. As I go on, I keep kind of trimming it, changing the wording a little bit, evolving.
Yeah. It reminds me, this is sort of unrelated, but still related. What was it? Joe McMoneagle. I think he had a talk where he was saying, I don't, worry too much about the target. I just focus on what they want. My session is, I ask my subconscious to give them what they want. All right. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting and different approach. Let me try that on my next target. So my next target, I told my subconscious, just give him what he needs. All right. Well, as it turns out, that target was something that was created by Dick Algier, who was doing a session at the time, a different session. And I started doing his session.
That sounds about right. Your subconscious is so literal. Like, that's funny. Go on.
So look at what's going on here. I mean, is this not an amazing place to be experiencing all this stuff? It's just remote viewing is just wonderful.
I feel bad. Some of these people that they don't. I so encourage people to do this, even at a casual level, because you're really missing out on the human experience. I mean, there's just so much. Again, and then you get, what's great is you have all these crazy experiences, and then you could go back and like have conversations between me and you and be like, could you believe this or that, or how did this work? I don't know. So it's not. So you have all these crazy things, and it's you don't. There's other people experiencing it too, like the whole spotting thing. I've talked about and all that. Other remote viewers have these experiences within the sessions that are just amazing. What's your favorite target would you say that you've done so far for Hellfire? Would you say it's the Whitley session?
Well, the target just before that really built up my confidence because it was about a family taking a Piper Cub airplane or something like that from like South America flying to Florida, and then they went over the what is it called, the triangle? What is it? The Bermuda Triangle, and they disappeared. And when I was working on this session, blind session as usual, I'm writing my perceptions down, and then there seemed to be somebody or something behind me, and I actually turned and looked, and there was nobody there, and I realized I was picking up something from the session here. This was some kind of element of the session. And so I started, trying to draw images of a head turning and looking out. And when I did that, I was getting this impression of a window. Like you're turning and you're looking out a window. And for some reason, what I was looking at was so way over there, I could only represent it in my sketch as a dot. And it was so small, I had to put an arrow. This is what I'm looking at, okay?
Yeah.
But as it turns out, that plane, crashed, and I had, debris floating in water and whatever. But the thing was, there was something going on out this window. Now, I don't know whether that had something to do with the airplane. Like, they showed pictures of this airplane, and, it was one of these things where when the wing comes out, there's these like torpedo-like gas containers hanging off each side. I don't know whether one of them started leaking or caught fire, or in my session, I was getting this impression that actually there was something flying nearby next to them, something unusual, and maybe there was some sort of interaction. Maybe he got scared and tried to avoid it. I don't know. But the thing was, when I got the feedback on the session, I realized a lot of my data was really pretty on target and better than what I was used to doing, and that gave me the confidence to step into the Whitley Strieber session. Now, you saw the data that I put in on that session. I decided it's given me all this stuff. I'm not even having to think. I'm just, it's telling me to, put this, and using words intradimensional. What the hell is that?
Yeah.
And I look it up, and it means, a being capable of, moving outside of their physical body and operating outside of their body. And it was like, whoa, this is really different.
Yeah.
So I just went with it. I did all right.
I think that's a huge element to a really proficient remote viewer, where state, like it reminds me of like the Indiana Jones, and in the when he was looking for the Ark of the Covenant, where there's no bridge there, and he throws, he can't see the bridge. That leap of faith, and he throws it, and he just steps out, and you just have to trust that anything that comes in, you're plugging in the process, and just try, because you get stuff, and sometimes it's so off the wall because you don't know what the end. You don't know what this is. You're just getting pieces. So you get hot, you get cold, you get brown, you get gold, you get, and you just have to, because we are so geared to be correct. We're so geared to be analytical. We're so, but with all the training, and you've done it so many times, it's all about feelings and feeling and intuition. You have to, you're trained to basically let go of all that concern and just let it do its thing. And and that takes confidence. You have to be confident in yourself, because sometimes it just doesn't work out. It's just, I don't care how good you are. Sometimes it just doesn't pan out. Something goes wrong.
That's very true. I don't know how you have good and bad sessions. I've noticed that at least in my subconscious, if it doesn't like the target, it'll just go off on its own.
Yeah, it goes somewhere else. Yeah. Yeah, I've got plenty of those. I mean, I'm sure a similar thing where you'll literally like name the target on your AOL on like the first or second page, and then like 15 pages after that, it's all garbage somewhere else. It's like you're literally you showed up, you're like, this is what it is. What else? Because you're in a perpetual state of what else, what else, what else, what else, and if there's not much there, sometimes you could just. Or it's like being in a bank or at the license branch. Nobody wants to be there. Not remote viewing, not in real life. You just don't want to be there. It's like, you're going to make me remote view the license branch? Don't make me do this. That would be my most boring, worst target, because any place you have no interest in, it's like you're there. So if it's interesting, if it would be interesting in real life, you're all in. So that's a part of it too. You're trying to train yourself it's about unboxing whatever it is. That's the interest.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I was going to ask you, what sort of targets have you classified targets that you've sort of like gone off in the wrong direction on? And I have. I remember doing a target for Pam Coronado. She's a psychic investigator. She actually works with the police and search and rescue and so on. And I took one of her classes, and she gave us a target. And this was in the ERV class that she had. Bill Ray was who was trained and used ERV.
Yeah, really good
military.
ERV.
Yeah. So he was the primary instructor on that class, and they issued a target. And it was another one of these things where I just completely went off in a different direction. And what the target was somewhere, I think in California, boats put Christmas tree lights on their boats. They go out into the harbor or whatever, and then people take pictures of all of these beautifully colored lights. Okay. But the photos that were taken were so dark and dim that I realized, okay, I'm having trouble with dark environments. And, there wasn't enough light. And then I saw another one of Joe McMoneagle's talks where he was saying, if you want to get a good target, choose one that has a lot of good contrast, good lights and good darks. That seems to help, at least with his remote viewing. And I realized, you know what, he might be right about that. Because maybe, Pam's target didn't have enough contrast for me to perceive, or at least at the level that I'm at right now. I don't know whether you get better at this or not. I have not discovered yet.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's there's something to do with, I think that I was a construction worker my whole life. So I'm drawn to aesthetics and structure. I'll miss what I would miss the most is like a nature target. That's what I miss the most. I'll pass it right up, and I'll not all the time, but sometimes. And
those are tough. Those are tough.
Because there's it's like the bottom base level of nothing. There's almost nothing there.
It is like a different dimension almost, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the organic arrangements and fractal stuff.
And you have homework like that. You got to take to stage 4, stage 6. It's like, take what to stage 4, stage 6? I pretty much built this out in stage 3.
Really
there's nothing. There's nothing left. I mean, that was a huge roadblock for me, was finding the exit. Like, get off. You're done. Quit pushing. There's nothing else there, because you keep pushing, and you start scraping the paint off of that target, like you
That's
go into yeah.
that's really revealing that you have gotten to that stage. Honestly, that's really, a lot of people don't know about that yet. So yes, that's. I'm glad you even brought that up. Exiting the remote viewing session for me, the last one I did way too many pages on this, but it just kept coming. And honestly, I couldn't, there was no place to stop. It was like, wow, this is really, really, really
Yeah.
interesting. And I want to see how it turns out, sort of so I got to a thing where it was like, holy crap, there's a lot here. And, I got to stop.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
got to stop because,
There's no ending.
it redirect me in a specific direction now if you
Yeah.
want to do that. But like, there's way too much going on here. So let me just
I have noticed
back
some
away.
things like, because I'm sure, obviously you try and you're trying to be, I consider, to me, what it really makes a really like, top tier world class remote viewer is a lot of elements. Obviously, hitting the target often, like a high percentage rate is part of that, but also accumulating high level. I'm not looking for textures, taste, and energy. I want word. I want intangibles. I want ideas, names, tangibles. I want high level data consistently too. To me that's a big part of it too. I don't, so I consider myself a deep dive remote viewer, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah,
Well, that
sometimes.
reminds
Yeah.
me of, I went to an IRVA conference, what was it, a couple of years ago, and Tom McNear was talking about, he had done this phonetic stuff, with Ingo Swann. I think he was the only one actually trained in this. But anyway, he was describing to the people attending the conference that how he did this. And he said, sometimes you just hear a phoneme, but the thing is, you need to write that down. Start with the phoneme. Okay, and then Sirius, what is that? Is that a planetary system? What is that? Uh, but just get those little fragments, down. And I've been playing around with that. I don't know where I'm at with it, but the thing is, um, I think when you start playing around with this stuff, David, ultimately it does lead somewhere. And I think
Oh
there's,
yeah, yeah. Oh, like cues. What I was talking about, like AOLs, for instance. So in the beginning, you get AOLs, and then you want to hold on to them, and then you end up dragging them through the session. That's kind of like the
yeah,
beginning.
yeah, yeah.
But now, so you're trying to like whittle this down and get better, better. If I don't get AOLs, I feel like I'm unbuckling from the target. So I'll just take a break. I'll go back to it because in my
Yeah,
mind, if your subconscious should be kicking out, it should be engaged enough to be able to say, okay, it's like this, it's like that. And if it's not doing that, then I feel like, well, maybe it's not. It doesn't want to play today. So I should
that
be
is
getting
a
noise.
very
Yeah.
difficult situation to deal with. And I know exactly what you're talking about. It's sort of like the session isn't happening right or something. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to explain it other than that. It's, how do you like further engage in it or whatever? I forget what I did the last time I encountered this. But anyway, yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Don, and talking to me, buddy, and coming on the chat and talking about ideograms and everything you're doing, and I'd love to have you on again. We'll talk about some other topics.
Oh, well, I enjoyed it. I'm glad to have this opportunity. I appreciate it, David.
Yep. So we'll see you guys next time, and I'll